Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. And today we have a question. There's a question that I'm asking to all the listeners of Movie Goodness today. Thank you for joining me on this episode. And the question I have for you all is there superhero movie fatigue? And I think it's a valid question. And this is coming off the heels of the just dumpster fire of a box office bomb that DC's The Flash had in the theaters. A movie that I thought, honestly, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people thought, would be $1 billion movie this year, without a doubt. And it's in strange fashion, I actually enjoyed The Flash. I thought The Flash was a well-made movie, real fun, good time. I had my problems with it, but overall, I thought it was a real good film. It's especially coming out of DC because DC has had some stumbles, and that's putting it mildly. But as of late, it's not just DC. Actually, it's Marvel. It's all comic book movies and TV shows, and the reviews aren't looking too good. And if you don't know what superhero fatigue is, it's a term one often hears these days when movies based on comic book characters don't do well at the box office. Some say there are too many superhero slash comic book movies that audience just get tired of having to see each one of them. And it's a valid question, I believe. I can see where there's some fatigue, but at the same time, I can also see where a couple of films have come out recently that pokes holes in those arguments. Now, this is all my personal theory. I don't have any evidence to back up the fact, but even still, I'm on the fence with it. So it's not like I sway one way or the other. So I'm an unreliable narrator here, but it is a question that has been sweeping all of these like critic sites and YouTube videos. They're doing everything to break down what is wrong. And it didn't just start with The Flash. This goes back. And I can take it all the way back to 2019. And we're doing today's show differently. You know, normally we discuss a topic. Today's topic is superhero fatigue. And then we go into a review, in this case, of a superhero film. But we're going to switch it up on y'all this time. Today, we're going to start with a review and then go into the topic. Because going by my theory, I believe that superhero films are suffering today because of this film. And it is the 2019 superhero film from Marvel and Disney, the culmination of 22 films or 21 films before it, Avengers Endgame. And this film was I don't know, it was like the season finale of a TV show. It was the not even season finale, the series finale. This was it. This was the final chapter in this book called the MCU. And for 22 movies, we followed these characters, we followed these storylines, and it all came to this. Avengers Endgame, which is directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, is the 22nd film in the MCU, and it stars Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Don Cheadle, Paul Rudd, Brie Larson, Katherine Gilligan, Diane Guerrero, Benedict Wong, John Favreau, Bradley Cooper, Gwyneth Paltrow, and of course Josh Brolin as Thanos. Whew. And that's not even the whole cast, believe it or not. And the premise of this film, in case you were stranded on Pluto and just got back, the premise to Avengers Endgame: the surviving members of the Avengers and their allies attempt to reverse Thanos' action in Infinity War. In order to faithfully review Endgame, I have to go back a little bit to an Infinity War because it's really like one movie, just split up in two. But at the end of Infinity War, Thanos won. The bad guy won, and he snapped. Not mentally, but he actually did the snap that was in the comics in the Infinity Saga, and destroyed half of the universe, erased half of the universe. And at the end of that movie, we saw some of our favorite comic book characters vanish in front of our eyes. Black Panther vanished. The Guardians of the Galaxy vanished. Spider-Man vanished. Doctor Strange vanished. You know, Bucky, the Winter Soldier, vanished. Sam Wilson vanished. Scarlet Witch vanished. I mean, everybody turned to dust. We witnessed Vision not one time, but die twice in the same movie. Actually, 5 minutes apart. Scarlet Witch had destroyed the stone in his head, and Thanos reversed time, brought him back to life, and ripped the stone back out of his head, killing him again. And so all this happened at the end of Infinity War. So we pick up in Endgame. I mean, our heroes are just completely dejected. You know, they lost. They actually lost something that the Avengers don't do. Tony Stark, he was lost in space. Him and Nebula, and Captain Marvel saved them and brought them back to Earth. And Captain America, at this point, he's dealing with some PTSD. Scarlet Witch, not Scarlet Witch. I'm tripping. I'm thinking Scarlett Johansson. Yeah. Black Widow, she's dealing with not knowing what's going on with Jeremy Renner character of Hawkeye. Now the movie comes on. We see Hawkeye playing with his family. They're out, they're eating lunch, having a picnic, whatever. He turns around for a second, and when he turns back around, his family is dust. His family is dust. And it's like, oh my God, man. And like, okay, so we're not over this. The shock of Infinity War at this point, when this movie came out, was still fresh. It was a year, but it was still fresh. You know, the wounds are still healing at this point. So when the movie comes on and you see this family being dusted, and you're like, oh my God, this is this is still happening. But it was such a gut wrenching movie. I'm talking about Infinity War. So now you're like, okay, everybody is low. Everybody is at their lowest point. All of our heroes, the original, the OG Avengers here, they're at their lowest of lows, and they have to muster up some strength to try to press on. They find out what Thanos is. They go find Thanos. He's destroyed the stones because they were going to take the stones and reverse everything and bring everybody back. Well, by the time they got to him, he had destroyed the stones, and they killed Thanos. And so now we fast forward some time, and Tony Stark, him and Pepper Potts have a child now, Morgan, a daughter. Everybody else has kind of moved on. Bruce Banner has become Smart Hawk, which is kind of unpopular to a lot of people. And I'll be honest with you, it at times it bothered me, but I got why they did what they did. Um, Hawkeye has become rolling. Now he's taking out the Yakuza and everybody else. you know, he just has nothing to live for. He doesn't care. And so you have that. You also have who else at this point? Ant-Man, he was stuck in the quantum realm all this time. Um he was able to get out thanks to a rat, and now he comes up with the idea about time travel. You know, going back in time, getting the stones before Thanos can actually use them. And using them, the Avengers using those stones themselves to reverse the snap. So this is a time travel movie. And everything was set up perfect. We got to revisit moments throughout the MCU. We go back to the original Avengers film from 2012. We go back to Thor: The Dark World. Up to that point was probably one of the worst, or not least well received MCU films, and they found a way to justify that movie. We go back to see Tony Stark reunite with his dad, and his dad, you know, he doesn't know who he is, and that was a touching moment to see this side of Howard Stark and talking to his son, and he doesn't know that was his son, but to have that father son moment right there, great, kudos. You know, we see Loki disappear, uh, use the Tesseract to escape custody, which sets up the Loki series that was on Disney Plus. Muscular, just built like a god Thor has turned into this drunken fat slob. Uh, you know, because he didn't go for the head, which he didn't do in Infinity War, which could have stopped it. But what did he know? All he was focused on was killing Thanos. But he has so much guilt. All of them are dealing with guilt and PTSD at this point. And we get to the final battle when they recover all the stones after a awesome sequence of all of them going to various points in time in the MCU to retrieve these stones. Even seeing Black Widow make the ultimate sacrifice uh, in getting the Soul Stone, which allows them to actually use these stones and reverse the snap. But as they reverse the snap and they travel through time, the younger version of Thanos finds out about it and follows them through time to present day. And this is where the battle takes place on Earth. Now, this is where Joe Russo, Anthony Russo, the writers did an excellent job in this film. We see right before the invasion that Hulk does the reverse snap. And as soon as he does the reverse snap, the invasion starts, and we get this epic battle that takes place. And throughout this battle, we see Captain America pick up Thor's hammer and use it. The crowd went nuts in the theater that I went to go see it in when that happened, and he gives it to Thanos, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, and at this point, Captain America just said, "Forget it. I don't care. I'm 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 probably gonna lose this fight. I'm probably gonna die here, but he's gonna have to kill me." Basically, he didn't say that, but that's the mantra that he had. He picked up the shield that was broken and it was about to go at it. And then we get the most epic line that I feel, oh boy, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. The most epic line in film history, which was a callback to Captain America, the Winter Soldier. When Steve Rogers first met Sam Wilson when they were jogging around the Lincoln Memorial, I believe it was. And every time Steve Rogers would pass Sam, he would say, "On your left, on your left." He would just kept running by him, "On your left, on your left." And so that was the epic callback when Steve Rogers, Captain America, was about to give it one last gasp against Thanos, and right before he is about to take the fight to Thanos, we hear on his little earpiece, "Cap, do you hear me? On your left." And we see that the portal opens up and Sam comes out, who was dusted in the previous film. And as that portal opens up, we see more portals open up, and all of the heroes that we lost at the end of Infinity War return. And all of them are ready for battle. Oh my God, what an epic scene. One of the most crowd pleasing scenes in movie history. And we finally get the line that has been set up over 22 films. Steve Rogers calls for the hammer comes to him, and he yells, "Avengers, assemble." And it was just, at that moment, I promise to the Lord, I'm sitting in the theater and I'm waiting for the movie to cut to black. I really thought the movie was going to cut to black right there, because I was like, perfection. I didn't need to see the fight. I just knew this was the perfect way to end this movie. And the mere fact that we got about 20 more minutes of this movie, I was cool with that too, because that was a battle. We see all of our heroes taking it to Thanos and his army, and epic moments of Spider-Man hitching a ride on Mjolnir, and we see Tony Stark. I couldn't get his name out. Tony Stark reunite with Peter Parker, and the hug he gives Peter Parker, like oh my God, it brought tears to my eyes. I was like, everything's gonna be all right. At that moment, I just said everything's gonna be all right. Little did I know, 5 minutes later, it wasn't. And the fight just kept going on. It was, but even with all the fighting that was going on, Thanos still had the upper hand. Even with the heroes returning, every hero on Earth returning to fight Thanos, they couldn't stop him. And Tony Stark asked Doctor Strange, who had told him in Infinity War before he had got dusted, that he has been through millions of scenarios, and there was only one scenario that we win. And that was before he gave him the time stone. So that was part of Doctor Strange's plan. That was the only way to do it. And that's what he told him right before he dusted. He was like, there was no other way. And he dusted away. So we get to this film at this point, and Tony Stark asks Doctor Strange, is this that one scenario? Is this the one? And Doctor Strange tells him, like, I can't tell you. You know, if I tell you, it probably won't happen. You know, it really didn't register at that point. But they showed the little quick little cutaway of Tony on Robert Downey Jr.'s face at that moment, and it was like it registered from him. Now, watching it on repeat, you see that look, and you know that look meant that Tony Stark do what he was about to do, what he had to do. And so, as the fight is going on, and they trying to get the glove away, the gauntlet away from Thanos, and he gets it. He finally gets it. And Tony Stark looks up, and he looks up at Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange just raises up his hand and puts one up. Like, this is it. This is the moment right here. Ooh, getting goosebumps. And Tony Stark just looks, and he knows, okay, this is it. And he goes over to Thanos, He fights with him a little bit, uh, holds on to the gauntlet, but we thinking that he's trying to take it off his hand, but no, he's actually, with his suit being nanotech, it's absorbing the stones out of that gauntlet. So when Thanos knocks Tony Stark off of him, he puts the gauntlet back on right, and he snaps again, and nothing happens. And he looks over and he sees that the stones are gone. And Thanos looks at Tony Stark, and we see the stones going into position. And as soon as they get in position, you see the energy, the radiation seep through that suit. And I'm sitting there in the theater, and I'm like, oh my God, this is it. They're actually going to kill Tony. Tony's actually going to make the sacrifice. And I mean, I just went numb at that moment. I went numb because I knew this was the only way. And it was like perfection. This is the only way this could play out. And when Thanos snapped his fingers, he said, I am inevitable. And nothing happened. And once again, we get another call back to the very beginning in 2008 with the first Iron Man. The final line in that movie, I am Iron Man. When Thanos says, I am inevitable, Tony Stark with the Infinity Stones looks at him and tells him, I am Iron Man, and snaps and destroys Thanos and his army. You want to talk about a moment that will live in infamy, something that I will remember for the rest of my life. Sitting in that theater, and you see all of the army being dusted, and Thanos was the last one to dust away. And he knew it. He knew he was done. I guess he felt it like he was gone. And he just sat down and kind of slumped his head into his shoulders, and he dusted off. And in that moment, the theater erupted in applause. I mean, I could not believe what I was experiencing in that movie theater. This was the most communal experience I've had in a theater in my entire life. It was a standing ovation. And as soon as everybody was clapping and cheering, the scene cuts, and we see Tony Stark stumbling, dying from the radiation. Immediately, everybody just stopped. The theater just went. You could hear a rat pee on cotton. It was like dead silence. And when Tony Stark died at that moment, well, Tom Holland is an amazing actor. And I wish he wasn't so amazing, because his acting in this moment when he's talking to Tony and he's like, you did it, Mr. Stark, you did it. And he's crying and telling him that. And Tony, he's so weak, he's so drunk, he can't even talk. All he can do is look. And I was like, oh my God. And then Pepper Potts finally came. It's like he held on just long enough for Pepper to come there. And as soon as she showed up and she told him, it's okay now, you can rest. Because we know by watching all of these films, Tony Stark doesn't sleep. He can't sleep, and that's how he makes all his suits. He's up all night, improving and trying to figure things out and stuff. He never sleeps. And when she told him that, I just broke down and cried. I'm about to break down. I just broke down right there in that theater. But I wasn't the only one. You can hear it all in unison. Everybody in there, and it was a packed theater. Everybody's trying to hold it together, and it's like, my God, but we couldn't. Everybody just went to crying, man. At that time, I'm looking at the theater owners, like, they are messing up big time. They should have had tissue. They should have had the ushers just standing there on this in the theaters with tissues, boxes of tissues, uh, to blow your nose and wipe your tears, because nobody was hiding it. At this point, it's no point of hiding it. Everybody was crying, and then we get the big funeral, and so on and so forth with Steve and um uh going back to put the stones back where they needed to be, and he ends up staying back in time to stay with Peggy, and everybody gets the happy ending. The end. uh, the direction was amazing. The writing was amazing. This story ended perfectly in my eyes. This Infinity Saga, the first three phases of the MCU, perfection. Avengers Endgame from 2019 gets a letter grade of an A plus. A perfect ending to a perfect saga. And that leads me to our topic. And the reason I feel that superhero movies have not been clicking in the past 4 years is because of Endgame. Endgame ended so perfectly. Where do you go from here? Where do you go? Especially in the case of Marvel. Where do you go? And we are stumbling out the gates in phase 4, which did not go over too well. Phase 5 is not doing too hot either. And I think a lot of that is because we haven't set up a villain. In the first three phases, the Infinity Saga, Thanos was sprinkled out throughout that saga. At the end of the first Avengers movie, uh, the Guardians film, he was mentioned in another film. He popped up in another film at the end credits and stuff like that. We knew his presence. Now we don't know who the big bad is. Now they told us it's Kang, and I know that Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, is coming down the line, or is it? I don't know. But we only seen Kang once, technically twice. But the actual King the Conqueror, we only saw once. And I don't know if we're probably going to get Kane, but I don't think it's going to be the same actor. But that's another subject for another show. But it just haven't had that same connection. And what's going on, I feel, in superhero movies now, we aren't connected to these characters. We were connected to Tony Stark. We got behind Tony Stark. We got behind Steve Rogers. We got behind Thor. We got behind Ant-Man. All of these characters played the part. It was the character first. It wasn't the story. It wasn't the setup for the next. It was focused on the characters. And lately, we don't get that. Films now are just setups for the next film or for the saga going forward. And that is where it's failing. Now, after this film came out till now, the superhero movies have not been clicking at all. Let's go through all of the films that have come out after Endgame up until right now today. Starting with Dark Phoenix, which came out the same year, 2019. Dark Phoenix was already a lame duck because Disney had purchased Fox, and they didn't really have anything to, to do with this X-Men franchise, so they just dumped this movie out. The movie was a dump anyway. Dark Phoenix was horrible. Dark Phoenix grossed $252 million at the box office, and I'm shocked that it did that. That's also that same year. We got Spider-Man Far From Home, the first film of the MCU following Endgame. Spider-Man Far From Home grossed $1.1 billion. and understandably so because this was fresh after Endgame. The Joker came out in such a different tone from from Avengers Endgame, but it was a very successful film for Warner Brothers and DC, and an Academy Award winning film. Joker grossed $1 billion at the box office. The following year, in 2020, technically, you really can't go by the numbers in 2020 because of the pandemic. But one film came out 1 month before everything shut down. That was Birds of Prey. And it was horrible, but it did gross $205 million. Also in 2020, at the end of 2020, Christmas to be exact, we had Wonder Woman 1984, which grossed $169 million. But it was also released on Max or HBO Max at the time, at the same time. So that affected the box office, but it also the quality of the film. It wasn't that good. So we move over to 2022, and I mean 2021. I'm sorry, and we have a slew of films that came out that year, 5 to be exact. Black Widow grossed $379 million. The Suicide Squad grossed $168 million. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings grossed $432 million. The Eternals grossed $402 million. And Spider-Man No Way Home grossed $1.9 billion in the box office. 2022, where we got more films, more superhero films than I think in the history of cinema. And this is where the fatigue starts to set in. First and foremost, starting off that year, we got The Batman, which grossed $770 million worldwide. Morbius, horrible movie, grossed $167 million, and that's after it was released twice in theaters. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness grossed $955 million worldwide. Another MCU film, Thor: Love and Thunder, grossed $760 million. DC League of Super Pets grossed $207 million that year. We also had 2 superhero films that were straight to streaming. You had Secret Headquarters, which was that dumb Paramount Plus film that starred Owen Wilson as a superhero, as a knockoff Tony Stark. I don't know what he was. It was not good. And you had Samaritan, which starred Sylvester Stallone, which was dropped on Prime Video. Also in 2022, you got Black Adam, which grossed $393 million worldwide. Another Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, grossed $859 million worldwide. And you can see where it started to drain, because these movies weren't too far apart from each other. And you notice that the box office numbers for each of these films has started to dwindle ever so slightly. Moving on to this year, in 2023, we got Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which was a major disappointment. It grossed $476 million. Now, these are worldwide numbers. I failed to mention that earlier. I know it seems like a lot, but it's not in the grand scheme of it all. It's good money, like if it's a small budgeted film, but when you're making $150 to $200 million movies, you need to triple your budget just to, you triple your box office, I meant to say, to just break even. So that's not good. And I think Ant-Man and the Wasp lost, I think, upwards of $60 to $70 million. I forgot what the numbers were, but not a real good number for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and especially when they introduced the quote unquote big bad of this saga, Kang the Conqueror. And so that's not a good sign moving forward. Uh, we also got Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which came out earlier this year. It grossed a measly $133 million worldwide. It was a huge bomb, and I can agree it wasn't that good. It definitely wasn't as good as the first one, and I think at this point, especially when we talk DC, a lot of people felt that these were lame duck films moving forward because prior to this, we got the announcement that we have a new head of DC Studios with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and they were rebooting the entire DC. But these films were already shot and made, so they had to release them. And these were lame duck films. They weren't leading to nothing. So a lot of people felt like, whatever, I'll wait till it come on Max and watch it. And I think that's what happened here. Along with another film that we're going to get to in a second. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It grossed thus far $831 million worldwide. It is a hit, and it was deserving of that. It is a awesome film. I love all of the Guardians films. Speaking of James Gunn, he directed the mess out of these movies, and that was one of the better of the recent Marvel films. I really enjoyed it, and so did everybody else. Apparently, one of the other big hits of the summer was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It has grossed thus far, at least the time of this recording, $570 million worldwide. I think that's twice as much as the first film made. So that is awesome. Good to hear, and I loved that movie. I Words can express how much I love Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But that leads us to our last superhero film that was released up to the time of this recording, and that is The Flash. And The Flash was a colossal bomb. I'm talking epic bomb in epic fashion. This was supposed to be the film that was going to restart or reboot the DC universe. We were promised cameos, which we got. We were promised action that we got. We were promised multiple Batmans and we got them. A nostalgia trip with Michael Keaton and we got it. But with all of that, it couldn't save this movie. I mean, epic fail. It cost $220 million to make The Flash. And that's not counting advertising and whatnot, marketing, all that good stuff. So far, at least the time up to the time of this recording, The Flash has grossed worldwide $220 million. A epic collapse. And there are multiple reasons why this movie did not do well. You can probably put fatigue in there. You can probably put the Ezra Miller of it all in there. With his personal struggles or whatever he's going through or they're going through. You can probably put the fact that people are kind of protesting DC as a whole, or David Zaslav, who is over Warner Brothers, protesting him, because a lot of people are still a little sore over the fact that David Zaslav canceled Batgirl. I've heard this come up in recent days, that the failure of The Flash is karma for Batgirl, because he said that movie was unwatchable. Now, The Flash wasn't unwatchable. It was very watchable. It was very good. I think it deserved to be a hit. in my humble opinion, but it just didn't. It didn't get there, and it failed. This is with the endorsement of everybody who's seen this film early. Stephen King saw this movie and said it was the greatest movie of all time. Tom Cruise saw this movie early and said it was the greatest movie of all time. Everybody who saw this film prior to the advanced screenings and critic reactions and stuff like that said this was the definitive superhero movie. And I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't even go anywhere near that, to be 100% honest with you. But it was still good. But it failed. And so, I don't know, there's a lot of factors that go into this failure. It's a lot of factors that go into the failure of Marvel. These films that have fell flat. With the exception of Guardians Volume 3 and maybe Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange almost made $1 billion, but not too many people like Doctor Strange. I would defend that movie, but I think the only reason that movie made as much as it did was because of the promise of the multiverse. And we didn't get much multiverse. We got some madness, but not a lot of multiverse came out of that movie. And so a lot of people were disappointed. And another thing with the Flash was initially supposed to come out like 2 years ago. And it was supposed to be the first multiverse film. You know, this was supposed to be the movie that's going to shatter the multiverse. But it was pushed back so many times. We received multiple multiverse films. Even one won an Academy Award for Best Picture. You know, it's crazy. And now I think a lot of people are probably multiverse fatigued at this point. So you got to throw that in the hat. But back to Marvel. Yeah, besides Guardians Volume 3 and Doctor Strange, which were financial successes, the rest have been staggered. Thor Love and Thunder, it made over $700 million worldwide, but it wasn't well received. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, made a decent amount of money. It made over $800 million worldwide, but it wasn't well received. You know, like the first one, the first Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture, the first comic book movie to be nominated for Best Picture. And this was a far cry from that film. Yes, we lost its star, you know, Chadwick Boseman, but the film just wasn't that good. It wasn't. It was all right, but it's nowhere near the original. And that's a problem we have in these superhero films. The character. I said this to start the show. There's no more focus on the characters. They are more focused on the overall story of this multiverse saga and setting up the next film, setting up the villain, setting up this. It's too much setup. It's too much setup and not enough getting behind these characters. And we're suffering, man. We're just in a bad spot right now. The only saving grace would be DC. We did find out a couple of weeks ago we have a new Superman, we have a new Lois Lane. That's going to be a part of Superman Legacy, written and directed by James Gunn. And this is supposed to be the new DCU and a new story, new universe. It doesn't come out until 2025. So that gives us 2 years, 2 years to the date almost, because it comes out July of 2025. And so we got 2 years to the day to kind of step back and chill. But there are still more to come this year. we still have the Marvels coming out in November. We still have Blue Beetle that comes out in April. Kraven the Hunter, which comes out in October. We have the second Aquaman film, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, that comes out in December. So we still have 4 more comic book movies to come out this year. And I'm not counting the Disney Plus shows, the Max series, all these tie-ins. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think people are just getting kind of burnt out. Now I do push back on fatigue because we don't get that from horror movies. You never hear about horror movie fatigue. You never hear that about action movie fatigue. You don't hear that about drama fatigue, mystery movies fatigue. You only hear that with comic book movies. And I don't understand why. That's where my problem come in at. Now, is it a valid argument? Sure. Sure, it's valid because there is a lot of content. And then when you incorporate the Disney Plus shows, when we talk about the MCU, now you asking an audience to subscribe to a streaming service to watch WandaVision in order to know what is going on with Wanda Maximoff and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Because if you don't watch WandaVision and you just go watch Doctor Strange, you're going to be confused as I don't know what. You're like, what happened? Why is she the villain now? It's just, the last I saw, she was about to tear Thanos apart. Now all of a sudden, she's the villain. What happened? Well, you got to watch WandaVision. Oh well, I don't have Disney Plus. This was a discussion that I was having around the time that Doctor Strange had came out in theaters last year. And I was like, oh yeah, I can see where people are gonna be thrown off. Just like the end credit scene at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. When Loki's sitting in that theater and you see that a Kang variant is there and he's all shooken up and scared. You're like, well, what's this all about? If you don't have Disney Plus and you haven't watched the Loki show, you're confused. Not to mention, you see Loki and you're equally confused because the last time you saw Loki, he was dead. And so all that, it's just so much. Now, I watch them all. I'm into them all. A, because I love them all and I want to watch it. B, is because I run a podcast that reviews and talks about this stuff, so I need to be in the know. And so there's a lot of reasons why I'm into it, but the average Joe Blow, they're not into all this. They don't know the ins and outs and what's connected and what's not connected. Is Robert Pattinson's Batman connected to the DC universe, or is the Joker Joaquin Phoenix Joker connected to Robert Pattinson's Batman it's so much going on. It's so much and it's confusing. And to the average moviegoer. It even confuses me at times, and I watch this and I research this daily. So I can understand for somebody who goes to the theater to watch the Batman and you're looking for Henry Cavill to show up. You're looking for Jason Momoa to show up. You're looking for Gal Gadot to pop up. And you realize that this is a completely different universe. And, I feel bad for a lot of average moviegoers. It must stink. It really do. It must stink to be in that position. And I think a lot of people are tired of it. And these are the results. The numbers are falling. The box office is dwindling. And even on Disney Plus and all these other streaming services and networks, the shows aren't doing too good. I think Secret Invasion has the lowest ratings of all the Disney Plus shows for the MCU, and it's a pretty decent show. So it just goes to show you, man, maybe there is too much content. It's just like Captain America. We got another Captain America film coming out, and for the average Joe Blow who watched Infinity War and Endgame, you know that Steve Rogers, he's done. He done hung up the shield. So how are we getting another Captain America film? Well, you had to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney Plus, and you would know why and how we got a new Captain America. You see, there's too much. It's too much for a lot. You're asking a lot of your audience, and not only are you asking a lot, but there's a lot coming out uh, jumbled up together. And you can blame some of this on the pandemic because it was supposed to be spread out a little better than this. We weren't supposed to get uh, 7 and 8 superhero movies in 1 year. It, you wasn't supposed to get these rushed movies that doesn't have completed special effects coming out. You know what I'm saying? It was supposed to take its time, but it didn't, and we're suffering in the long run. But my final verdict to the question, or my final answer to the question, is there superhero fatigue? I'm 50-50 on it. I'm swishing on this thing. I don't know if if it's superhero fatigue or is it just straight up quality of film. I In the case of The Flash, which I think was a real good film, I think a lot of people were just burnt out with DC in their bad films. You know, Black Adam was bad. Shazam Fury of the Gods was bad. Aquaman was bad. Wonder Woman 1984 was bad. Let's be honest here, So these weren't great films. And nobody wants to spend their hard-earned money on something that they think is going to be bad because it's been bad. And it's like the boy that cried wolf. They finally hit the pay dirt here, and enough was enough. Everybody was like, nah, I'll pass. I'll pass. I just seen enough. It is all we're almost to that point with Marvel. We're almost to that point. Hopefully the Marvels itself, the film that comes out in a few months here, I hope that it is good. I really do. I'm reading some early reports that some of the test screenings are saying that it was fantastic. With that being said, we also heard that about The Flash. So it's a wait and see here. We shall see. But yeah, I'm 50-50 on it. I see both sides of the argument. I just think if you make a better movie, you make good movies, people will come. Make Give us a new story, something we can connect with. People will come. And so that's the challenge for these filmmakers. Let's see where we go from here. But I'd like to know, what do you think? Are you tired of superhero movies? Or you think there's enough? You think that we reached the pinnacle in 2019 with Avengers Endgame? It's kind of a tough bar to clear. That is a high bar to clear. And you're asking us to start over from scratch, basically. Because that was perfection. And we're starting over. They should have just stopped. A lot of people are like, they should have just stopped. Or they should have introduced, should I say, the X-Men. Because that's something different from Marvel. We got 20th Century Fox X-Men, which was all over the place. But Marvel, in the hands of Marvel, it could be something great. That's where they should have came out the gates with, I think, after Endgame. Let us take a break from these core characters that we had, and set up some different stories moving forward. I think once we get into Fantastic Four, X-Men, and, these new characters, it will be received better. But until that happens, we're going to drag through because we've seen these before. Thor, that was the fourth Thor film, Love and Thunder. We're tired of Thor. We're tired of Thor. I don't know. I don't know. I just hope it gets better because I don't want them to stop. Because once Hollywood see that they're losing money on a certain genre of film, they'll stop producing them. They've done it time and time again. And I don't want them to stop making superhero films. That's why I support them all. Because I grew up in the era when we didn't get good superhero movies. If we got them, they were few and very far between. And so I'm loving this, me personally. Yeah, is it a little too jam packed? in the past couple of years, yeah, 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 yeah. Over the last 2 years, since 20, let's just go to last year in 2022 on to this year, we got a grand total of 14 films that has come out in the past 2 years, with four more to come. So in the that's a grand total of 18 films in the calendar year, just superhero based. That's a lot. It's that's a lot. And so yeah, maybe just tone down on some of it. And this coming from somebody who would watch superhero movies all day, every day. But let's pump the brakes. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But like I said, I would like to know. What do you think? Do you think there's too much? Maybe they should stop, give it a rest for like 2 years, let people brain settle, and then come back with some material. I think they're doing right in DC. I think 2 years, we start over with Superman Legacy. Let's go. That'll work. Marvel, I think too many wheels are turning there. They can't stop that train from rolling. But I want to let me get this question out. I want to know, what do you think? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at the KB Radio Network, and on other social media platforms, just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget, we're on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the KB Radio Network channel, if you don't mind, and like this video. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you're currently listening to movie goodness on the KB Radio Network. Thank you for joining me for this discussion on superhero fatigue. I'm fatigued. I'm tired. I've recorded 3 shows today. 3. So I am fatigued. So I'm going to bed. But before I tuck myself in, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.